Jena Chojnowski and Silvia Wozniak. Welcome to the ANATOMYINCLAY Learning System podcast.
Thank you. Thank you.
From Winthrop University in South Carolina, I gather you're just right outside of Charlotte, North Carolina. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yep, about 30 miles.
Okay. So in northern South Carolina.
Just enough to get to the MLS games. That's right.
That's great.
Probably Messi coming very soon.
Yeah. Yes, indeed. Well, now we know at least one of your interests or hobbies. That's great. Fantastic. Well, I'd love if one of you, maybe Sylvia, if you could just tell us a little bit about Winthrop and where we are, what kind of institution this is, and how big it is. And I know you've been around for a long time.
So Winthrop started in 1886 as a school just for teachers, females. And the first president, he went to ask for some money. He was granted the money, and the university started. In 1895, it moved from Columbia, South Carolina, into Rock Hill, where the campus is currently. And 1954, it became co-ed, or the idea of being co-ed. It came in 54. In 74, it became fully co-ed. We have since the 2000s, around 6,000 students between undergrad and grad students. And we had last year, Dr. Cerna, he became the 12th president. And he is a former student here. So in the class of 2002, he graduated, and 20 years later, he became the president of the university, which is a really, really cool thing for us to have. The university is very revitalized with that, and he is somebody that is his alma mater, and I think the meaning for that is incredible. So we have several degrees, including biology, but we have athletic training, and in biology we have pre-med, pre-dentistry, pre-vet, pre-pharmacy, pre-physical therapy. So that's what we do a lot in the biology department, but we also have degrees in business, chemistry, computer science, criminal justice, education, exercise science, finance, nutrition, mass communication.
We got
tons of other disciplines. I guess you're more interested in the biology, right?
The biology, yeah. Well, why don't you each introduce yourselves in terms of just your title and what kinds of courses you teach?
Okay, well, I'm Dr. Jena Janowski, and I got my Ph.D. from the University of Florida in the biology department. And then I did some work as a postdoctoral associate at the University of Georgia. And then for 5 years working there. And then I got an assistant professorship at a University of South Carolina, Beaufort, in near Hilton Head, South Carolina. So nice. Southeast kind of girl, I guess. Nice. Not a plan, but that's how it ended up. And then I went from there to here, Winthrop University, where I'm an assistant professor as well. So slowly making my way north, very slowly.
What kinds of courses have you been teaching, Jenna, since you got there?
So I got hired here as the anatomy professor, but that is just one of my roles. So I definitely also teach general cell biology. Like I'm a little microscopic kind of person, like cells and molecular biology and developmental biology and histology. So anything that's really small is my kind of forte, along with anatomy, which is the biggest thing that I work with, I guess, physically. And so those are the classes I teach. And then I also do research here. So my research is in these things, the eyeballs. I work
Mhm.
on the corneas and the stem cells and immunity of our eyes to help people be able to see better.
Wow, that's interesting. Very interesting. Wow. And Sylvia, if you could just give us your title and also kind of the realm you oversee instructionally.
Very good. So I am an assistant professor, and my trajectory was a little more traveling. I had my undergrad in Brazil. I did my master's working with HeLa cells and morphological changes during after heat shock. Then for my my PhD, I worked with hemoglobin and diseases of the clinical side of different diseases related to hemoglobin. And then I came to do my postdoc at New York University, and I was working at the Department of Biology. And after a year, I moved to Mount Sinai School of Medicine, also in Manhattan. And I was working with lysosomal storage diseases. So one particular disease that was our main goal was Niemann-Pick. That's the name of both German physicians that describe the disease. And as I said, it's a lysosomal storage. So the patients, they do not have a certain enzyme. And in consequence, they accumulate a lipid, a fat in their cells. And the patient eventually dies because the lungs do not function.
Oh, yeah.
So my job was, we had obtained a knockout mouse model. And my job when I started my postdoc was to develop therapy for the disease using that mouse model. And then we moved for personal reasons to South Carolina, and that was 23 years ago. And I started here at Winthrop as an adjunct, and I taught many different courses from Bio 101 that doesn't even exist anymore, and many kinds of general biology for majors, for no majors. And the last maybe 7 years, 7 to 10 years, working with physiology first, then anatomy a little bit before Jenna came. And I currently teach anatomy and physiology combined for non-biology majors. So my exercise science, athletic training, nutrition students, here they come, and it's a 200 level anatomy and physiology combined. Like Jenna, she teaches a 300 level class, just anatomy. And we have another course that is just physiology. Mine is both disciplines combined, and we have 2 semesters teaching anatomy and physiology combined.
Okay.
My students are more the pre-med, pre-health
Correct.
biology majors that have plans on going to post-secondary education kind of places.
Yeah. I was just about to ask about that. What kinds of tracks are your students on? What kind of careers are they imagining that they'll be pursuing?
Yeah, I definitely get a lot of biomed or pre-med majors, but not limited, vet, pre-vet, pre-dent, pre-something. Throw in a couple of letters there. They have to go through me. Anatomy. So, and like she said, I teach just anatomy. And then we have another professor that teaches the physiology course. And my students, my class is not required for our biology major, but you can't go to dental school. You're not going to get into med school without having taken an anatomy class.
Yeah.
Like a 300 or above, like anatomy class. Like it's not. So we have this course, and I love teaching anatomy, so it works for me.
And we have former students that come after med school, and they say, look, really keep that level up. Do not lower the bar, because we need to go much further later on in grad school. So the better prepared they come out of undergrad.
Yeah. What are the variety of ways that you've been teaching anatomy? What kinds of techniques and approaches have you used traditionally?
Oh, you got to throw the traditionally.
Yeah.
What? So
Well, you can, yeah, I'll subtract that adverb.
well, because the thing is with teaching anatomy, the anatomy itself isn't always changing. Like your muscles are your muscles, right? So what I taught 10 years ago and what I teach now, like at the anatomical level, isn't all that different. It's not like we're having these huge, breakthroughs in this new muscle that has been found that I have to teach. What's different about the teaching is the approaches to the teaching. And so, and there's no, I want to take out the traditional, because traditionally you just throw a bunch of figures at the students and then you go memorize it. And so I don't teach that way anyway. So I like to come at it from as many angles as possible. Like no student is the same, right? Like no student's the same. Absolutely. There's no student the same. And the way that they learn is very different per student. And so the way you have to provide the data has to be in a variety of ways, so that hopefully one of those ways will hit one of the students, so not all 4 ways that I present the data is going to be this masterful, like, oh, I get it now moment for each of the students, but hopefully one will, and the other 3 just kind of help it out. So, I mean, I do have a lecture lab kind of style where we sit and we have to give them background. I do a lot of case studies during my lectures and where we apply things, though I don't teach physiology, so I kind of have to take that out of it a little bit. So she doesn't have to do that as much. You can combine them a lot easier, but I try to like take that out. And then we do have a lab, of course, which is the best part, right? It's the 100%. Best part. And my approach to the lab is provide as many what I call stations as possible for the students. And so in each station, it's a different learning technique. So we just have like straight memorization over here, and that's usually the models. Then we have our hands-on approaches, what's how do you say it?
Kinesthetic.
Yeah, kinesthetic, and that would be you guys. So our anatomy in clay, and then we have our dissections. So that's really like, application, like how this really affects you as a person. And then we have our anatomage table as well. So we have that to really provide them with, again, hands-on, but in a different sense. And then they have some virtual labs. So I have this list of like 6 different ways to provide information, and I pick 4 each week. And then they have like 4 stations that they have to go to each week for each body system. Unfortunately, we have to, because they have to do like a system a week.
It's a lot of information.
Yeah.
I mean, I go through, there's like 11 systems in the body, and I've got 16 weeks, and then you got to throw in tests and quizzes. I got to get all the way through 11 systems. It's a lot.
It's a lot.
But what can I do? Like, be like, no, we're going to take it easy. Don't learn this information. Don't worry about it. You'll be fine in med school.
Yeah.
I got to push them. You got to push them hard to be able to get them in there. So
can't just skip the nervous system
yeah, you got to hit all the systems, and you got to hit them hard so that they will be better prepared when they go on to the next school. So I definitely enjoy the more hands-on approaches. I mean, I love the anatomy in clay. I love my anatomage table. The models are fun. They just kind of sit there. And I'm a big fan of dissections. We use the cat for our main component. We also have plastinated models, which is awesome. So we have like a human leg that's been plastinated, and we use that for the muscle systems and the nerves. And we have plastinated hearts and brains, lungs. So we definitely like to throw the book at them, throw the hands-on book at them.
Yeah. Sylvia, can you talk a little bit about, or do you know how anatomy in clay came to Winthrop?
Yes, it was Professor also an adjunct, and that he was here for some time because he was a physical therapist, and he introduced that to us. And we had a little get together one day, just the professors, and we are playing with the anatomy and play. And what I really liked, and when I made the little Instagram showing Jenna's class, I looked it up, and it was when I found one of the sentences that I believe your creator introduced, that what the hands touch, the mind will never forget.
The mind cannot forget.
I really believe that that's true, because when I did my first time playing, I had the mobility. As Jenna said, the models, they are there, they're sitting in there, and you can name all the parts, but you cannot move them. But with the clay, I don't just create my morphology, but I also can modify. One really good example that I find is I make them make the nephron. Most of the diagrams in books of the nephron, you're going to have the renal corpuscle, and then you have the proximal convoluted tubule, the loop of Henle, the distal convoluted, and your collecting duct. But the distal convoluted tubule actually goes back to the vascular pole of the nephron, and there is just a glomerular apparatus there that senses blood pressure and tubular pressure. So that visual in a fixed model I cannot obtain, but with the clay, once I make the nephron, usually as it appears, I can put that tubule back into position to get that physiological relationship. Those are things, I can put my lobes of the brain, in different colors and kind of position them in there. So I use not as much with the muscle, which is my understanding what most people use anatomy in clay for, but I use in other structures. And it's kind of playing with Play-Doh, but
much better. It's
the students really enjoy, just because you have that active motion, and you're designing and you're putting it together, and it's something that it's another way for them to really memorize that structure, because they're copying from a model, but you can manipulate, and that's something that even the anatomage table cannot really. We can dissect, but I cannot move a position of a vessel, for example, or a tubule. So
how many years?
I find really helpful.
Yeah. How many years have you had the system then, roughly?
It's maybe 5 years.
Okay. Yeah.
And what's interesting, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead, Jenna.
I was gonna say, what's interesting is we both have access to the anatomy and clay system, but we use it for completely different systems. We have different classes. She can do the physiology part of it, where I'm more of the anatomy part, where you do anatomy and physiology. You're more special than I am. But we don't even use it for any of the same systems. You can use it for any system, but the ones that we've chosen to use them for are completely different. And I think that's kind of cool, just the versatility of it. So the systems, I use it for muscles. I use it for the circulatory system. I use it for the nervous system. I use it for the eye. I use it for the digestive, the kidney. I don't use it for reproductive. I can't get into really getting the students to go make reproductive parts. I think that's just too much.
It might get tricky.
Yeah. But I use it for those systems, and I don't even use it for the kidney. I don't do the whole nephron thing of a kidney. I just have them put a kidney in the skeleton, and I'm like, there it is.
Yep.
But it connects the bladder, and it's part of where it is more anatomically than
Because I need the physiology. So I really need to kind of get the anatomy kind of quickly and then concentrate, especially because most of my students, they have to take this course to be able to attend exercise physiology, because it's the athletic training, exercise science students. So it's a prerequisite for them to have anatomy and physiology. So I need to go strong in the physiology. So it's a tool that is helpful for both disciplines, not just anatomy. So you can put anatomy and physiology on clay.
Yeah. So what's the general reaction from your students using anatomy and clay? Jenna, you mentioned you have many different kinds of students, but you're asking them all at some point to engage with anatomy and clay, correct?
Yes, they have all touched it. Yep.
Yeah. So how do they react to it, and how does it seem to flow with the students?
I mean, in the beginning, they really like it because in one level they're like, oh good, I don't have to just like fill out a piece of paper and like label things, right? So they're like, oh, at least I don't have to do that. But I get kind of mixed reviews, never negative, but the students that love it, like they're like, yes, this was it, this helped me, this made it happen, it's visual, and I get really good feedback. But some of my students don't like to touch things, where they do have like, I don't know, like sensory issues, or they just like, and they just the touching of it, and the clay gets on their hands and it dyes their hands a little bit. And some of them just don't like that. But those are few and far between. Mostly everyone is just like, let's do this. It's really fun. I make them take pictures of it, and I hear back from them like, I showed my mom. It's at Thanksgiving dinner, like my picture with the digestive system, and I make them roll out that whole small intestines, right? Like the whole intestines has to be rolled out and put in there. And you know what I do is I make them do the digestive system, and we get it all in there, and then they got their lungs and their kidneys and the little bladder, and then I'm like, okay guys, now let's put a fetus in it. Hey, right? Like, oh, now we got to put a fetus in there. Yeah, that's right. What happens to all that stuff once you get a fetus to be put in there too? Right at the end. And I always add that at the end. I don't tell them that in the beginning, and it like blows their mind. And I love that part.
Yes. And anything that you can introduce that fun factor, it really works well. And those are the memorable moments, right? In a classroom where I had a student the other day, and I don't even remember in what context, but she was mentioning, oh, I did that in high school, and I had to do it using candy. It was maybe the structure of a cell, which you can do with clay, right? But many middle schoolers or high school teachers, they use candy, and it's memorable. People will not forget. It touches your hand and will stay in your mind. So I think that's. And the other thing I would like to say is that COVID forced us to go into a world of technology, really, because everything became virtual, and so many techniques, virtual dissection and 3D printing and everything virtual, right? So the technology is insanely cool. I'm not complaining. I love to have more tools in that sense. On the other hand, you have several cons, right? Dissection or touching, you're seeing as you go with your scalpel, you see the different textures of the different tissues, right? In histology, you learn about the tissues, but you're seeing them in an image under the microscope. And now you're actually feeling, as you dissect, the texture, right? How hard, how soft, how gooey those different tissues are when you have a knife in your hand and you're cutting. So there's some tools that they are not as fancy and highly technological, but they are really, really helpful and necessary. So it's a big conflict in keeping the technology obviously advancing, but also not forgetting those simple things and some of the practical issues related to that, because technology might be prohibitive financially or training, for that to be widely applied. And definitely the textures. So I think that it's important to keep high-tech things and things that are simple as clay.
Yeah.
And as Jenna said, approach them from many different directions, so you can actually have a lifelong learning experience. Because that's my biggest fear as an educator. Yes, the bottom line is their tests and that they pass, and that's mostly what they care, right? But you need to, for me to feel well at night when I'm talking to my pillow, I want them to have a lifelong experience that they remember when they are actually using that basic knowledge that they learn in undergrad.
I want them to know where the kidney is.
That's
Yeah.
That's correct. That's correct.
She has higher ambitions than I do. I just want them to know that a kidney bean looks like a kidney looks like a kidney bean. And that where it is, it's in the back. Like I love the 3D aspect of it and how size kind of matters. Like you can't just make this huge kidney and put it in the body. Like it's reflective of how it all like comes together, how tiny the heart is really, and how big the diaphragm, and so like how it like visualizes, because we have been seeing students see 2D all the time, like, but if you're gonna go on to the world is not 2D, like hands on, and the anatomy in clay really is, I think, one of the major things in our class, that the only thing really, I think, that does both those things, provides the 3D vision of it and provides the like relational components of it. Because models, you can do 3D, but it's like this huge eyeball, like, right? Like that's not really reflective of like how that fits in the body. And comparing it to everything. I'm all about comparative anatomy, like how this and this are different, but yet the same. And yeah, I love that part.
Yeah.
I think that's something that the anatomy clay is the only part of my lab that really provides that part of it. And I think the students need to know that, especially the ones that are going on to be our doctors.
Yeah. Yeah.
Need to train them well.
Yeah, they
need
need
the
to know
patients.
where the kidney is, right?
Yeah. Well, one of you mentioned photographs, and I think that's how we ran across each other, was seeing the Instagram post you made, which we really appreciate. Have you been regularly posting on Instagram and posting?
I have one more. I don't know if you saw the last one.
I don't think so. Can you name the anatomical structures depicted in clay here?
Yeah, so that's her work here. Do you put that in your quiz, in your tests?
And I didn't. I do for the Instagram, just as
okay.
a fun. So I am also Mark, the internship coordinator. And about a year ago, I said, how can I reach out to the students? Because students, they really don't go unless they really need. They don't go to websites unless you give an assignment. They are not going to go and dig, but they are scrolling Instagram constantly.
Yeah.
So I said, okay, that's my way to feed them broccoli surrounded by cheese. So I'm going to try to reach them that way. And it kind of worked. I'm very proud. I love the Instagram because I put funny things like this. That's just for fun. Can you name what those structures are? Or I go.
I got 100.
To Dr. Chojnowski's class, and we interviewed the students. As you saw, that's how you found us. And I love the way that they explain how they are using the anatomy in clay and any of the other tools that we have. So of course they enjoy the fact that they're being portrayed in the Instagram and their friends are seeing, but also, I can share what's happening. And I think that this is really, really important. We need to make the students engaged in that pride in what they are doing and make education fun.
That's great. Well, I can imagine they're feeling very engaged given how engaged you both are. And Silvia Wozniak and Jena Chojnowski, we really appreciate your coming on the podcast today and sharing some of your experiences. And best of luck to you and to all the folks at Winthrop University.
ANATOMYINCLAY is the best.
Thank you, guys.
You're welcome.